Greetings, Kindred. I am Voivode Maquette, and welcome back to our World of Darkness and another cover to cover. Today we're going to be going over Vampire the Masquerade War of Ages, which is a book that came out, I guess, a little while ago. I got the PDF. I just got the physical copy a couple days ago when I returned from vacation. And so I'm sitting here on this beautiful morning with a cup of coffee and my physical copy of the book, and I figured we would go ahead and read this. These cover to covers serve a couple of different purposes. One, they help to get information out to you guys for at least my opinions, so that you can decide whether or not these books are good to add to your own personal Nodus libraries. But also, it ensures that I read these books fully at least once, because I am so guilty about getting books and just setting them on my shelves, just like so many other people are. So let's go ahead and go through this book. I haven't even removed it from the plastic yet; it's still here, all shiny. I do want to say that this book came with a little bit of an advertisement for both Laws of the Night and Darkness Emergence, which is pretty cool. It came with a Eternal Struggle card. I got Tegrius. That's pretty freaking cool. I don't know if everybody got the same card or not, but it's really cool to get that. And also a War of Ages bookmark, which is fun. So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and pop into this right away and take a look at what's underneath the plastic. It's like we're doing a box opening on the channel. That's an area of the internet I'm not prepared to go down. Okay, so... Oh, nice. That is very nice. It does come with a dust jacket, which is very, very cool. I am going to discard the dust jacket. Not because I don't appreciate the concept of the dust jacket. I actually highly appreciate the concept of the dust jacket. My issue is that dust jackets are made out of thin paper material, and I will rip them. So when I read them, I take off dust jackets. That dust jacket is going to go right back on when I'm finished. So, first off, I guess first and foremost, let's check out the gorgeous art on the cover. The art for the opening story is gorgeous as well. I really like the gauche paint aesthetic that they tend to use in these books. These colors in this book aren't as bright purples and pinks as some of the other books. I'm liking the more earthier, brighter tones with the deep greens and the yellows and everything. And I'm not an art critic, so I don't know why I'm doing this part. But the art in these books is just gorgeous. That's awesome. All right. Anyway, let's get started, and we will talk on each section as I go through this. Okay, so I just got done reading Be My Sin for the Evening, and I have to say that this was a very quick and whirlwind experience. Being introduced to the inner workings of the vampire society by Victoria Ash. I'm not going to go into details because this is something to be experienced, but as I was reading young Deja, I believe. I'm horrible with names. As I was reading young Deja's experience, as she was being swept up and brought into this world that she was obviously not ready for, my heart was beating. Like, it's a very well-written book, and from what I understand, the main director of this book is the person who does all the writing for Victoria Ash in at least the 5th edition stuff. So the Camarilla book and things like that. And I gotta say though, it felt like being swept away by Victoria Ash. It's the way that it was written was great. It's a great introductory story. These little things right here, these introduction tales that get you going and get you in the mindset to read these books. Really, I really wish they could be expounded into novel form. Reading through chapter 1, introduction, really pinpoints the fact that they're just trying to make you understand that this book is about getting LARPs off the ground. This book is not going to have rules and disciplines and things like that, but it's going to have sample storylines. It's going to have how to set up a venue, things like that. Um, for what this book is, I see this working very well with the new Laws of the Night book that's coming out. And as as they'll work together hand in hand tangentially to make running a LARP easier. And I gotta say that I appreciate it. Going on to 3 Decades of the Dead, it goes into the history of Vampire the Masquerade, specifically its LARP scene, the kind of effects it's had on society, and also the fact that this book is intended to be system neutral. That you could use this book with the old Laws of the Night books. That you could use this with Masquerade, which it came out in like 1993. You could use this book with the Mind's Eye Theater books from By Night Studios, and there would be no difference in the use of this. Reestablishing the fact that you're not going to find game rules in this book, and I want to point that out because I don't want anybody expecting what I expected when I first heard about this book, that it was going to be about how to play Vampire the Masquerade, that it was going to be basically a new version of Laws of the Night. Now, By Night Studios has given that to us, and I've already done a cover-to-cover on that, and I'm going to be experiencing gameplay for it in San Antonio within the next couple of weeks. But this book has its own uses. It has its own purpose, and it's there to explain how LARP works in its many ways, in its many different types, online, in person. Um, anyway, this book is how to organize LARPs and also to give inspiration on how LARP can work, not only for the storytellers out there, but also for the player base. I'm very happy to say that in Chapter 2, Vampire Society, um, the background story that was set up in the introduction continues along. A Society of Blood goes into a lot of interesting details on why vampires would hang out with other vampires, which I think there's always a little bit of this in most books on vampire, but they go into full details on sections of why do the Anarchs hate the Camarilla, and why do the Camarilla hate the Anarchs. But it also goes on to individual basis on how a vampire goes from being a human turned into a vampire into a member of the night community. And it's written really well. It flows really well. As somebody who does not read well, let's just put it that way. I personally, I have dyslexia, and I have a psychological, like, I hate reading because I was forced to read so much as a child. But these books got me into wanting to read because I was so interested in the storyline itself. And the way that it's pieced together, it really does bring in, as somebody who's been playing since 2003, and it's 2023, so I've been playing for 2 decades now. It really does add new perspectives on why individuals would be in the situations that you find them in a situation, and how where LARP is not just a game of personal horror for Vampire the Masquerade as it is on tabletop, but it's It's also a game of community horror. Blood, freedom, passion. Where the kindred congregate. Chapter 3, small events. So many subtitles. I gotta say that this chapter is useful for those of you who want to start a LARP quickly. Uh, LARP's where I got my started. I started playing LARP in 2003, and I ended up becoming a storyteller for an incredibly large LARP that it ebbed and flowed with players as people got jobs and new people came in and people had to leave for reasons, and then everything came crashing down when the pandemic hit. So we're trying to generate this back up again. But it's a very good chapter on how to get a LARP going. In fact, it starts with generating a LARP concept, and that there are 4 steps to getting a LARP going, which are location options, finding a place to play the game, which I'm glad this is number 1 because it's actually one of the hardest steps. 2, LARP concept, coming up with how your story is going to go. 3, a sketch out of actions and conflicts. And then 4, make a LARP. It's very well put together, and those 4 things really are the backbone of how a live action experience is going to work. This is very well put out for people who have never done this before. Also in this chapter, it goes into 4 different scenarios. There is swimming with the sharks, at the fireside, dive bar, give up everything. The book, these stories are really good ways of starting. It's basically like the same concept of the Fall of London, or the Chicago Chronicles: The Sacrifice, or Sticks and Bones in the Cult of the Blood Gods book. It's a scenario to get your game going, so that you can feel it out. Also, if you run one of these, you then start to understand how you can create your own. The storylines that they have are separated into the story itself, how it works, why it works, and getting that understanding is important for somebody. As I said, when I started, I was thrown into storytelling originally. I did not originally intend to ever become a storyteller. My storyteller got pregnant and asked me if I would be happy to, or asked me if I would be willing to cover for them when they couldn't run anymore, and I got the bug. I wanted to keep storytelling. I enjoyed it. I loved being involved in everybody's scenes and scenarios, and seeing what all the different characters were doing and who they were on the inside. Seeing the natures and the demeanors of the characters and the players. And this chapter right here really does go into how that can happen on a mechanical basis. In chapter 4, Anarchs, a bloody, bloody beat, it starts with the description of how being an Anarch Baron can almost lead to a sense of hypocrisy in Anarch territories. And it really does, because you've got that mentality of there is no leadership, and like we're all equal, and then the dude stands up and says, well, I need to be heard. And it gives you a good listing of different styles of barons that you can play. And now, Thicker Than Water, the game that I run right now, which is tabletop, not LARP, has had its share of the different styles of barons. And they've all been different in their own way. And this book gives a great a good number of examples of different styles of barons and how they run their territories. And then it goes into different territories that are Anarch ruled, such as Nashville and New Orleans. And then it goes into contested territories. So areas where the Camarilla and the Anarchs are button heads and how exactly that stuff is run. It's a well written section of the book. And over the years, I've found myself like I understand the Camarilla just fine. I completely get it. I understand that it's a pyramid scheme that the ones on the top stand on the necks of those below them, and it makes sense. And I would be in a world of darkness where I was a vampire. I would be comfortable in the Camarilla, no matter where I stood, because I know that there is a model for success. The Sabbat, I get it. I get it. It's the exact same thing as the Camarilla, except instead of a business bend or a social hierarchy, you have a religious hierarchy. Now, fifth edition Sabbat is completely different from the older editions, and I will be happy to go into that at some point in time in another video. The differences between modern versus previous Sabbat incarnations. Um, but I got it, and I understood how it worked and where my characters could fit into place in that. Anarch, I have just always been like, what the hell are you supposed to do here? What if you don't want to fight? What if you don't want to be that Kindred who is responsible for blowing up the Elysium or kidnapping the prince's favorite ghoul? Anarch's always been difficult for me, but I like the way that it's presented here. I'm primarily an Anarch storyteller right now, uh, um, but like most of my Anarchs, just try to like do their own thing, but get caught up in the battle as it is. But I like chapter 4 and the way that it explains the leadership roles of the Anarchs and exactly where they fit in Kindred society. Chapter 5, Camarilla, goes into effectively the same thing as Chapter 4, but from the Camarilla's point of view, and how exactly the Camarilla runs cities. And it goes into a lot of great information, including the roles of the specific titles that you find within Camarilla cities. The Prince, the Seneschal, the Keeper of the Elysium, etc. It goes into fine detail on how these positions can be used in a LARP. I gotta say, Chapter 6 surprised me. I did not expect to see a Sabbat section in this book. I'm pleasantly surprised. I played in Sabbat LARP for a very, very long time, and you do play some characters that commit atrocities that you would never want to do in real life, but you're portraying the monster. When you play a Sabbat, you're playing through those dark impulses and doing the things that horrify you. It's therapeutic in a way. All LARP, in my opinion, is therapeutic. But like when you play the monster, it's it can get terrifying really quick. I've when I started running LARP, specifically the Sabbat. When I started running the Sabbat, that's when I started introducing aftercare into my games. Um, when I think back on hindsight, I realize that I should have done that kind of thing for the Camarilla and the Anarchs because it's a subtle evil that you end up portraying. Um, and it gets into you, it earworms you, it gets in there and causes subtle, um, subtle changes. But with the Sabbat, it was just so harsh. It was like, I need to take the time to sit down with my players and say, how are you holding up after that? Was that scene okay for you? Lines and veils need to be placed. And it's not just the Sabbat, it's just that the Sabbat is the most overt and obvious that it needs to be done. Chapter 7, Ghouls, Glorious Immortality. Playing a ghoul in a LARP is so interesting. This goes into the same idea as the previous chapters with the Anarchs, the Camarilla, the Sabbat, and now ghouls. These are those who serve. And I found that ghouls are actually one of the more fulfilling LARPs to get started in. Playing a servant to the immortals. And this chapter covers everything that you need to know about ghouls and how they are portrayed in a LARP setting. Having an entire game, or at least an entire section of a LARP, be ghouls can lead to some pretty interesting situations, because where the vampires, with all of their high and mighty powers and the abilities to manipulate the mortals that they interact with, all become sequestered away in their salons and their bars, the ghouls are the ones doing the dirty work a good amount of time. And that can be where a lot of your fun comes from when playing in a LARP like that. Um, Chapter 8, Ashirra. I'm still a little disappointed in this chapter. Not because what's in it isn't good, it's just that it's so short. There's only a few short pages. The Ashirra is a section of the vampire world that has so much mystery about it. And this chapter goes in great on how to incorporate Ashirra characters, how to incorporate Ashirra refugees into Camarilla cities, um, how to play both true believers and frauds, people claiming to be Ashirra. Um, because, like, the Camarilla doesn't know anything about them for the most part, other than the fact that they are like the Camarilla, but they're Muslim. And so basic vampires, basic capes, I'm just going to put it that way, basic capes can just not know anything. So you could bring in somebody who's pretending to be an Ashirra, lie through your teeth about everything because you don't know anything about them, and you're never going to get caught, really. I wish there was more. Um, I don't know. I'm a huge fan of the Ashirra because it's such a outlander when it comes to typical vampire games. You don't see it very often, and when you do, there's just such little information about it. And this book is continuing that tradition, unfortunately. But I also kind of get it, because you don't want to release that much information about it. If somebody really, really wants to play an Ashirra character, there are so many resources and so many different books where you can just pinpoint little tiny things and bring them together to create a full picture. And it's dedication at that point. So if you want to play an Ashirra, this is a good place to start looking for information. But the older books, you're going to find more information on. Chapter 9, Big Events, A House Full of Devils, is it's a great read. I would like to point that out there. And where the previous chapter that went over how to organize small events was good for that purpose, this one really details how to do big events or even overarching stories, which kind of fits me more than the other one, because where the other chapter is really great on getting everything started, I have tend to not end my LARPs unless I absolutely have to. And what I mean by that is I've played in overarching storylines that have gone for years. The LARP of Fort Myers, Florida that I got started in had been going on for over like almost a decade before I got involved in it. If you talk to some of the people who played in it, it doesn't really make any sense, because their stories say that it was going for like longer than Vampire the Masquerade was even a concept. So the legend outlives the story. But in this book, in this chapter specifically, this goes over how to run games that will go on for overarching storylines that you can continuously add more and more. And there is examples on storylines, just as in the other chapter, on how to run an outstretched story that keeps going, and it's very nice to see. It's well written, it's well done. The concepts are a lot of fun, but it's definitely something. It's a starting board. It's something to start with and grow from, and that's something. Putting your own little twist on it is going to be important. Chapter 10, The Second Inquisition, is exactly what it says it is. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It talks about how to bring hunters, organized hunters, into your LARP as an antagonist and a threat. And I think the second part there is the most important thing to look into: a threat. This is something that is there to frighten your characters in the background. I don't want to go into extreme detail on how everything is said and done in here, but it's so written well, and the transcript at the very beginning is just a lot of fun. I actually tend to enjoy reading the Hunter transcripts that are in a lot of the books. And the Second Inquisition itself is terrifying. Just the whole concept that they're out there, they know. This is a lot worse than Task Force X or Project Twilight has ever been in the past, because they have so much information. Chapter 11, War of Ages. This self-named chapter, it's so good. This chapter goes into how to actually LARP out war in all of its concepts, in the war room, on the street, the battlefield itself, and what are the consequences, the repercussions to fighting in public. How do you keep the masquerade when the status quo is warring against the lower subjects? It's so interesting, the idea of keeping the masquerade in such a situation. You need to have complete and utter control over influences, police, media. I actually ran a scene not too long ago, and when I say a scene, I mean a 4-hour endeavor. Not too long ago, I think it was actually like 3 sessions ago, um, where only 2 of my players were able to come to game. And again, we're doing tabletop setting right now, not LARP. But this really kind of feels like it with the way that it was described. We had 2 players who were able to show up because everybody else had was either sick, out of town, or had previous engagements. And I love running the smaller games because you can get more into the personal ins and outs of people. But I had decided that since one of the players had severely screwed things up on a social angle and with the Camarilla and angered his sire, who was a primogen, um, that was the night that they had chosen to attack on the way the Camarilla was going to, just an open, full on assault on an Anarch uh, organization. And I had set up, like, in advance, a perimeter of masquerade blocking influence use. They had cleared the area, put up police blockades, um, had preset a story for the media on handling things. The mayor's department was involved in it. Like, there was just so much that they finally were able to just clear all the humans and go in and just, as they thought, respond to the anarchs in the only language they know. And just went in and physically whooped them. And they ended up getting away in the end. And I can't wait until I can actually get around to publishing that story so that you guys can hear it. But it was just so intense on the influence use, not just the outright fighting. And I think that Chapter 11 really shows how to pull that kind of thing off very, very well. Chapter 12, Boons, is short and sweet and necessary. This is the part of Vampire the Masquerade that I have found in a lot of LARPs and even in tabletops gets ignored the most because people don't A, want to get it involved, or B, don't understand how it works exactly. This is the currency of the land, Boons. This is pre-station. This is how it works and how to enforce it in a LARP setting. Now, I have personally always been like, well, you need to have what we call a paperwork bitch. You need to have somebody who's willing to help you out with paperwork, especially in a larger LARP setting. But we always named the stations in a Camarilla city for the assistance that they offer out of character. So, like, somebody who handles all your paperwork has always been the Harpy in our games. The person who is an assistant storyteller directly under the head storyteller has always been the Seneschal. And it's really always helped. It really has, because they in a Camarilla game at least, they end up playing those roles in character and out of character. And when it comes to having boons in the game, you need to have a good organization on who owes who what they owe, when it is owed, if there is a timeline. And this chapter really puts that front and foremost in a very simple, condensed way that I think most people would understand, because some of it can get really, really confusing. But boons are important. Don't get me wrong. Chapter 13, Praxis, goes over the concept of taking praxis. Whether that be starting your game with how the game is run already, politically wise, taking over, overthrowing a prince, all of that stuff. And it's detailed fairly easily. Believe me, it's not an easy thing. I'm saying that it's put understandably. Like, being able to read this makes a lot of sense with the way that it is used. Um, it's still going to be a hell of a ride, but like there's really not much to say about this other than it's written well, and it really does show where things can go. And one of the common plot lines that I've seen when an anarch overthrows a prince is them becoming prince themselves. And one of the best ways for the Camarilla to defeat the anarchs in that situation is to just let it happen. Because at that point, the anarchs hate the new prince, who was an anarch, which starts infighting within their kind. It's just all over the damn place, but it works so well. So another short and sweet chapter is chapter 14, LARP Resources. This is basically a small questionnaire on how to run a LARP. Things that you really need to think about before, during, and after. But also, there's a good section in this chapter on lore sheets. Not only how you can utilize the lore sheets that are already within the V5 setting, but also how to use lore sheets that you create yourself. And I appreciate that very, very much, because creating custom lore sheets for a game that you're running can make a lot of sense if you're trying to set up the game that you want to run, but you want to make sure the players have access to things that they themselves want. Because if somebody wants to create a lore sheet with you, and that definitely should be a storyteller plus player activity, get together, go to a coffee shop, bring a pad of paper, sit down, work things out, make sure it's balanced. That gives the storyteller no excuse in going, oh, I didn't know what you wanted in this game. And it gives the player no excuse to say, oh, well, we expected this. Like, this is the best way to get people to be on the same boat. And I highly, highly appreciate that Chapter 14 for LARP resources was added into this book, because it cleans up a lot of out-of-character messes that players and storytellers can find themselves in. Chapter 15, Collaborative Vampire LARP, is something that I highly appreciate. And I know I have a lot of good things to say about this book, except for the chapter on Ashirra, which I wish could have held a little bit more information. But the reason I highly appreciate this is because collaborative LARP is Nordic LARP. And as somebody who lives stateside, um, the concept of Nordic LARP has just like over my head completely. Honestly, could not understand it. Because where I do understand the concept of this person is obviously stronger than this person, and like they have like no excuse not to be able to overpower or something like that. We are talking about creatures of unimaginable power. We have super fast, super strong, super durable, able to uh, dominate men's minds, able to become invisible, able to have psychic abilities, things like that. And adding superpowers to Nordic LARP has been so confusing to me. And also, nobody wants to lose. Everybody wants their idea to come in first place. And that's not exactly how Nordic LARP works. It's about telling the story. It's about telling the best story. And you need to collaborate and work with people to make it happen. And this chapter really does help the concept of Nordic LARP, collaborative LARP, parlor LARP happen, because it is severely like taking over. And I think that people who grew up playing Laws of the Night or The Masquerade are going to have a little bit of a hard time getting into this type of role play. But I can see where it is a good venue for people who want to act, people who want to tell a yes and story, not be judged by rules and mechanics. Um, and I like it. It's something that I would really like to participate in more. When I was in Indianapolis helping out with the By Night Studios Gen Con LARP, we used LARP Lite, which is a system they are developing that I hope to see out soon, because I want to be one of the first people to buy a box for it. There was more yes and in that storyline than I expected. There were some minor tests being thrown here and there using the old rock paper scissors system, but for the most part it was, I'm doing this, well in response I'm doing this, well in that case in response I'm doing this, and it was a beautiful, well turned out. So between that experience and this chapter, I feel like, as somebody who's been role playing as long as I have, who's been storytelling as long as I have a little bit more of a firm grasp on how collaborative vampire LARP is possible. Chapter 16, the final chapter, online roleplay, is so timely for me right now, because I am actually currently in the middle of working with some people to create an online experience for the community, and one that can include everybody, and we're approaching 2,000 people. um, but this chapter helps out because it has guidelines for storytellers, guidelines for players, and it really does explain how you can get a story across when you're not sitting at a table, or where you're not standing in a room that is just there. It helps you to set up things. And given the state of the world right now, this might be one of the more prominent forms of LARP, if you can call it that. Live action role play is not just going to the park or going to a venue any longer. There are people who play online. Exeter by Night is one of the prime examples of a beautiful LARP that is not only figured out on how everything runs on Discord, but is portrayed over TikTok. There's a LARP that you can watch scenes on TikTok. And it's mind-blowing to me how this thing that started sitting around a table with some friends and playing through a dark themed storyline and evolved into dressing up and going downtown and being your character portrayed through physical means by costume and by posture has now evolved into the cyber age. And I'll admit, as somebody who's been playing for a while, that slightly frightens me, but I'm also intrigued. I love how things have gone by. I was lucky enough to be accepted into Exeter by Night, but I was too busy to actually do it because I run so many different games that their planning sessions for getting the TikTok videos out, they unfortunately fell on times that I had games going, and I was so sad that I had to drop it out because it looked so fun. And I cannot wait to build something like that for my community. Anyway, the way that online roleplay has evolved, it's not just sitting around in chat rooms and doing play-by-post anymore. It's literally live action roleplay. And the way that it's evolving is just so much fun. If you guys have not seen it, if you guys are on TikTok, check out Exeter by Night. I'm sure there's plenty of like, I'm pretty sure there's lots of like compilation reels you can find on YouTube or something for the storyline that's going on. But it's so good. It's so fun. And it shows how strong of a spirit our community as gamers, as people who are seeking to live multiple lives, experience other things that we would not be able to experience on our own, are we're unbreakable. And we're going to continue on into the future. And that is it, my friends. That is Vampire the Masquerade War of Ages cover to cover. I greatly enjoyed sitting down and reading this book, and it took a while. I'm not gonna lie. There's a lot of information in this book, and I gotta say that I love sitting down and reading something I can hold in my hands more than reading PDFs and things like that. Where, I mean, they definitely do come in handy. It's nice to have them at the table if you don't want to carry books around and stuff like that. But this book was just such a fun thing to read. I want to say thank you to the authors. I want to say thank you to the artists who made this book not only full of information, but also visually appealing and beautiful. This is a wonderful additive to my Storyteller, my Nodist library, and I will definitely be using it in the coming nights as Laws of the Night comes out, and I start getting my LARPs back up and going again. And I cannot wait to hear from the community on how they plan on using this, in my opinion, invaluable resource in their games. I am Voivode Maquette. This is Our World of Darkness, and thank you for joining me in this cover-to-cover read of Vampire the Masquerade War of Ages. Good evening.